guys. So I'm gonna try to tie 3 streamers for y'all today. We're gonna start with, it's kind of a variation of a bunch of different patterns. I call it a slider bugger, so it's got a slider style deer hair head. It's a sculpin imitation primarily. It works really, really well for me here locally. I fish in the Weber, the Provo a lot. It's a smaller pattern by today's streamer standards. That's a single hook fly. For a hook, we're gonna use a 2461. This is a size 2. And then I'm gonna use some large size double pupil eyes from Hairline. So these are the black with the yellow right there. This is one of my favorite color combinations. I'm gonna be tying an olive and yellow variation here. You can tie this in a whole bunch of different colors. But when you're doing these deer hair slider heads, one thing that I like to do is the eyes are gonna be set pretty far forward. So the front edge of the eyes, I like to be on the back side of the eye of the hook. So that kind of gives me my gauge of where I want those eyes set at. And then I'm gonna tie these eyes in on top because I do want this to ride hook point up. Being that it's a slider style, you kind of drag this along the bottom. You can dead drift this really well, strip it, all that good stuff. I'm using Danville 140, so it's got a little bit of stretch to it, so I like it for setting eyes because you can pull it and get a little bit of stretch out of it, and it really sets those eyes in place. And we'll work back. And then I'll just use a little bit of glue on those eyes. Then we're gonna do a marabou tail. I also like to do this a lot with Arctic foxtail on the back, but when I do the ones that are 2 colors, I'll usually use marabou at that point. So this is prime long marabou from Nature Spirit. I like it a lot for these style streamers, and I just peel it off the stem to work with it, but you can see how long and flowy those fibers are. Okay, so we're gonna use olive and yellow. And I'm going to start with olive. I'm just going to cut those little fluffies off in the end there. And then, kind of like with most things, I'm going to shoot for maybe a little bit longer than the entire length of the shank there. We got that first clump tied in, and I can just tie in those butts there because I'm not too worried about building up bulk here. So we got 1 clump of olive, and I'm going to go with a slightly smaller clump of yellow. This is kind of going to be the belly color here. Put that right on top.
Next up in the Adventure Theater is Doug Ouellette from Pyramid Lake. Want to know about catching giant lahantas from a ladder? Go watch.
Okay, so we got that set there. Now I'm going to tie in a little piece of just tippet, whatever you have. This happens to be 5X tippet, but I don't think this is important. I'm just going to use this as a counter rib against some feathers I'm going to palmer on the hook. So we're going to tie this on my side of the hook. And now I'm going to select 2 feathers. These are Whiting 4B saddles. These are really awesome if you do stuff like this. They also have the American, which is a little bit nicer. These ones work great for if you don't need the length that the Americans provide. So the American saddle is going to be longer if you do, musky flies and predator flies and stuff like that. But for doing stuff like this where you want a mixture of schlappen and kind of like that like Chinese saddle hackle and stuff like that, you have a little bit of everything on here, so I like these a lot. So these are, it's a yellow grizzly, olive grizzly. I'm going to select one of both and then I'm going to tie them in. So give me a second to get a couple of those. A little bit further back on the cape and get a little bit wet deer feather, so it's a pretty big one. And if anything, I like this fly to be primarily olive, so I will, if anything, I'll select a little bit bigger olive feather than a yellow one. So I can try to match them, but worst case scenario, it's okay if the olive one's a little bigger. Okay, so we'll line these feathers up. I don't think it matters which one's on top of which. And I'm going to tie them in by the tips. So I'm just going to make myself a little tie-in point with both of those feathers and tie those in. I'm just gonna get a little bit of ice dub, and I'm gonna make an underbody of ice dub, and then I'll palmer the feathers on top of that. For this color combination, I really like the olive brown ice dub. It's got a lot of nice UV properties to it. It's got some brown, some olive in it, some purple, good color. And then you can do a dubbing loop if you want, or you can just kind of dub it on a little chunky like this. Alrighty, so now I'll take those feathers and we'll work those forward just kind of like a lot of other streamers out there, right? So woolly bugger style. Then I'll do a couple denser wraps right at the front of this fly. Capture that. And a couple fibers got stuck there, so we can just kind of free those out with a brush if you have one. Oh, I do have a comb. I remembered something. There we go. And then I'm just going to work back over those feathers a little bit just to make a little pad for me to tie in some rubber legs. With the rubber legs, you can use whatever color you like. One thing I like with rubber legs is to look for some to have kind of like a barred effect to them. So I like barred rubber legs. This happens to be the silicone streamer legs that we sell over Fly Fish Food that are the speckled pumpkin color. These look really good with the Drew Chacon crusher legs, the brown ones. Those look really cool on here too. So I'll get a couple legs and I'll tie one on each side. And I'll V-tie it, so I'll have 2 legs going down each side. Okay, so I'm going to be done with the 140, so I'm going to go ahead and whip finish that. I just kind of pass that in front of the eyes and then throw a whip finish right there. And then these legs, oh, I forgot to palmer my mono, so let me do that real quick. First I'm going to put in my 140 though. Excuse me, this is 150 denier GSP. Just kind of work that through, counter ribbing the opposite direction of which way you went with those hackles. Just kind of wiggle it back and forth, it'll work its way through. It's a lot harder with legs in the way, so do it before you tie in the legs. Alright, and then I'm going to trim these legs. I like them slightly shorter than the tail. I think a lot of times when you have the legs too long, they just end up fouling up. So trimming them so they're just short of the tail is where I like them. So I'm going to leave this guy right hook point up right now because I'm going to put a deer hair head on this guy. So this is an olive primo strip from Hairline. This is great deer hair if you like to tie streamer collars and stuff like that. It flares really nicely. Kind of running low here, but when I'm selecting these basically for streamers, I like to kind of push them in the middle, and you can kind of feel the sponginess of it, how hollow the hair is. And I try to get one that feels really spongy so that way it flares really nice. So, and then one thing that I'll do is I'm going to cut a really big clump here. I think a lot of people when they're doing these collars, they don't use enough hair. Especially because after you clean it, it's going to have a lot of the hair is going to be not there anymore, so you can see how much I got cut there. It's a pretty good chunk, right? So So I'm gonna go ahead and brush out all the under fur out of this, and then the shorts will come out as well. All right, so got that prepared. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in my stacker. The two best stackers for doing these bigger deer hair collars that I found is this Peak stacker, this big guy here, or the Renzetti Magnum stacker is really good too. It's a lot better price point on the Renzetti one too. It's not bad at all. Okay, so we got those tips all evened up. Get out any of the broken tips that I don't like. All right, so where I'm gonna measure this collar up to, as you can see the hook point there, that's basically where I want the tips of the hair to go to, is that hook point right there. So I'll put that right on top there, and then I'm gonna pinch it with my other hand. I'm gonna do one loose wrap, a second loose wrap, and then another thing that's going to help you a lot, these eyes make it really easy to stack this deer because the eyes hold the hair on top, so it's not gonna go around the hook on you or anything like that. You can even put a little drop of glue there if it helps you out, but pulling straight down is the trick here. If you pull to the side, it's going to pull some of the hair over, so I'm just going to pull that straight down as best I can and set that hair right into
Next up in the Adventure Theater is Doug Roulette.
So now I'm going to take these wraps. It's going to be a little hard to see, but I'm going to take this GSP and I'm going to do a couple wraps just to kind of lock my work in place underneath the eyes, just like that. And any of the hair that didn't set, I'll just pull that out right now. All right, then I'm going to get a little bit of bruiser blend. Usually I would use like an olive or a yellow on this one. I don't have any with me right here, so I'll use Butterbelly. And this is not a necessary step. This is just something I like to do because I think it makes the fly look nicer, but basically what I'll do is I'll pinch that bruiser blend over the thread, and then I'm gonna pull that right in front of those eyes, tuck it, pull it back over the eyes now and do a wrap over the top of it. So it makes kind of like a little beard on it there, right? Just to cover up that GSP and those thread wraps. All right, so we got that there. And then a trick I learned from Cheech with these heads is trying to whip finish is really difficult and probably not necessary for most people. So what I do is you just get a really thin super glue. I'll pick up the hair with my other hand and I'll just dab some super glue right on those tie-in points. And while it's still wet, we'll take one more wrap and just pull it really tight right into that glue. And I've tied a whole mess of these and done this glue finish here and not had any problems at all. So, okay, so let's go ahead and trim this deer hair now. Get me a razor blade. I like these Astra blades because they have the numbers on them. They have like a 1 and a 2 on them because I end up finding out that really I can get one really clean head out of per each side of razor blade. So the 1 and the 2, if I set it on my vise, I'll remember which side I used first, so it's kind of nice. So then basically I'm going to make a half moon shape, right? And I'm going to use that hook eye as a guide. I'm going to start there straight down and kind of work around at this type of angle, like that. So we'll go ahead and start there. And a couple wraps a couple swipes to clean that up a little bit. And then I'll basically take the razor blade straight around the eye like this just to get those ones that would get in the way of tying it in. Like that. All right, so that's that pattern there. So you can see it's got a nice wide profile in the front of it. So it does a really good job of imitating a sculpin, I find, and I've had really good success with this guy in this yellow in combination. My second best combination has been olive and brown, is also a really good color. And then kind of a straight ginger color also fishes really well. So, all right, so let's move on to the next one. This will be a little articulated pattern. It's actually what a lot of these articulated guys would consider like a micro articulated pattern now, because they've gotten so big. This one has actually been my #1 producer. It's my #1 seller on my site. It does really, really well for me. And I'm going to tie it in my #1 color, which is gold, which I think is a really underutilized color in the streamer world. So basically for the back hook on here, this is actually a really easy tie too, especially if you make some of these dubbing brushes, which I have here. This is just gold ice dub spun up in a dubbing brush. So we're making them over at the booth if you want to check it out. But if you have some of those made up, this is a quick tie. So this is a size 4 B10S. This is the rear hook on here. And then I'm going back to the 140 Danville. We'll put a little thread base on here. All right, so I'm gonna take that brush that I made, and I'm gonna go ahead and tie that in. And then I try to make it so I can tie this in all the way up to the hook eye, because no matter where you cut that end point at, it seems to cut your thread. So I want to get it as close to the finish as I can. So I'll cut that out, and then I'll take my thumbnail and just kind of try to flatten it out as much as possible to avoid it cutting the thread. That's the only negative of the brushes I find, is that that end is really sharp. So now I'm going to go ahead and take this brush, and I'm going to go ahead and palm it around. There's no tail on this fly. This whole hook is kind of like the tail, so there's not going to be any tail on the back hook here. And then I'm just kind of palming it back, making like almost like a hackle as I go. This is a size 4 B10S for the back. It's a Gamakatsu, and then it's gonna be a size 2 in the front. So. I'm gonna make myself a little tie-off point. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead, and if I can find my whip finisher, I'll whip finish it. There it is. And that's all there is for the back hook. I'm going to go ahead and brush this out because it's a little bit matted from tying it in. And if I can find it, I have a mess of marabou up here. I need to fix that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and brush that out now. So pretty simple for the back hook. You can see it tapers really well though, so it makes a good shape for the back hook. And then we're going to put on the front guy now. This is a size 2 B10S. And we're going to tie in some double pupil eyes again. Those have become kind of my go-to streamer eye. They're an awesome eye to work with. They add just the right amount of weight to give you that nice jiggy action, I find. So it's been my go-to for sure. And I'm gonna go with the same color, the black with the yellow eye and the black pupil. So this one and the all orange one have been probably my favorite color combinations of the double pupil eyes. So I'm going to give myself, it's going to be tied maybe one eye set back. That way I can tie one clump of bruiser blend up at the front here, so I don't need a ton of space. And this hook, this fly, being that I fish it more kind of like a tractor aggression style where you're getting those kind of swipe hits at it, I want it riding hook point down, so I'm flipping those eyes underneath. Pretty much all my streamers I prefer to ride hook point down unless it's a sculpin style pattern where I'm fishing it very close to the bottom. Everything else I'll ride hook point up. Hook point down, excuse me. Okay, so we got those tied in there. We're gonna put a little glue on those eyes. Now this is one thing that everybody has a different strategy for, and I don't know who's right, but how to articulate a fly. So I'm gonna show you guys how I like to do it. So this is just some beadlawn wire, some nylon coated steel wire essentially. And I'm gonna tie this in right on top of the hook shank. When I tie it in, I'm actually gonna go down the band just a little bit. And I'm going to kink it so that way it's pointing straight back. And I'm going to get one 6mm bead on this size. Just kind of something to match. You can do whatever you want. Some people want to put like a little hot spot there. I just like to kind of match the streamer color that I'm working with. And then I'm going to make a loop there. So I want that loop I'm making there to basically be close to the size of another bead, maybe a little bit smaller. And then I'm actually going to tie this wire on my side of the hook coming forward. And what that does is it makes the loop, the two wires sit side by side when I tie them in. So I'm tying this on my side of the hook. And now you kind of, I don't know if you can see that very well, but basically these two wires are sitting side by side here at the back of the hook now. And then another thing you hear a lot of people debate about is whether you need to double it over or not. You probably don't, but I do it anyways because I don't see how it hurts. So it's a streamer, so I'm not too worried about building bulk up. It only is going to make it tougher, which I don't have a problem with. I would hate to be fighting a big fish and then come back with just my front hook, so that doesn't seem very fun to me, so I'm going to go ahead and double those over. And then I'm going to throw just a little dab of glue on that articulation point I made. So we're going to go back to that dubbing brush that I made. This is with the gold ice dub. You can just do these with dubbing loops too if you don't want to make dubbing brushes or only going to be tying a couple of them. A dubbing loop works just fine on them. And I'm just trying to do these wraps a little bit denser in the front, just to help build taper. And one thing I find when I make these dubbing brushes is that one side is always a little bit sparser than on the other side of the brush. So when I do that, what I end up doing is I use the sparser side on the back hook and then the denser side on the front hook. It just helps build that taper even more so. Okay, so we're gonna go right about to there. I'm going to put a marabou collar on this, so I need to leave myself a little bit of room there. And we'll brush that out again. And then for the marabou, you just want to get something that matches. You can even use two colors of marabou if you wanted. I'm going to use tan here. My favorite color to use on here, but I'm actually out of, is like a ginger colored marabou on this gold color. And I'm just going to tie it in tip first. Now one thing with these smaller ones is if you have these smaller marabou feathers, is basically I want that marabou to go basically halfway to the next hook, right? If it's too big or you're using some of those prime long marabou, I find that the Petition, the tool set, the tool clips work really well to make kind of a dubbing loop of marabou. And that works really well if your marabou is too big, because you don't want the marabou being longer than the rest of the fly, which a lot of stems will be, like some of the blood quill stuff and things like that. Okay, so I got that tip separated. I'm gonna go ahead and tie that in. And then I just double that tip over and kind of just let it go back into it. I don't even trim it off, I just make it part of the collar. And then we're just gonna do some palmering of that. And marabou is, I think, tougher than a lot of us give credit to, so if I trap some down, I'm not too worried about it, I'll just brush it out at the end. So we're gonna go ahead and trap that there. And then what I try to do is I try to put 2 wraps on the back side of that stem. Then I'll preen everything back. Try not to stab myself. And do a bunch of wraps in front to kind of lock that. Then I'll get in there with my scissors and cut out the stem. And then whatever got matte down, I can go ahead in here and just brush it out. And what I find, the reason I put the marabou collar on here is anytime that you add a natural material on the front of a primarily synthetic fly, you get the back half to swim a lot different than the front half, which makes that wiggle when we go for with articulated bugs. So when I keep the back half 100% synthetic, it's going to get a lot more of that wiggle in the back end than the front end will. So I always like to throw, I like primarily synthetic streamers most of the time, but I'll always add one natural material on one of the hooks. So this is Bruiser Blend Junior. This is the butter belly color. I like this color. It's probably my favorite one. It's got like, it's a nice ginger color, but then it's got hints of UV and gold in it, so it does a really good job. And when people are using like either Senyos or any of these yarn style dubbings for building streamer heads, the biggest thing that I see most people doing is they use way too much of it, and when they brush it out, it all comes out basically, and they're not left with anything. So what I find the best way to do that is you get pretty sparse clump, right? But then you make it so it's flat. You don't make it so it's like a straight thing, like a tube there. You know, you make it like a flat aspect there. And then I'm going to set that right where I want to tie it in. And then when I tie it in, I'm going to pull it towards the eyes. So I'm pulling down towards the eyes. Okay. And then if anything, I'll have the top be a little bit heavier than the bottom. So I'll try to make the same size clump, but if it's a little bit heavier, always err towards the top being heavier than the bottom. Okay. And then now I'll preen these both back and get some wraps in front of them to lock them there. And now I'm going to work my way to the front of the eyes. And we're going to do one more clop, top and bottom. And that'll be it on that one. Bruiser Blend's pretty slippery, so I do like having this waxed nylon thread from Danville just because it grabs onto it a little bit better. Tying this stuff with GSP is kind of not very fun for me. Peel both sides back and put some locking wraps in front of it. And I'll go ahead and whip finish at this point. And then I'll take my comb and I will brush out this head. And then if you want to make it a little bit narrow, you can take some scissors and trim it. I like it to be a nice bulky head on this guy, so I'll leave it right there just like that. If I had my brown Sharpie, I'd probably put some race stripes because all streamers need race stripes, so it's important. Just joking. All right, so you can see it's a pretty small bug. It's not huge for articulated stuff, but this guy is awesome in the water. With those large size eyes, gets down quick, fishes really well. So that's been my #1 producer for me this year in that color. It also fishes really well and with black ice wing fiber and a black grizzly bonehead, black marabou, and copper works really well too. So let's see. I got time for one more, so I'll knock out one more for you. So we're gonna do a little bait fish pattern that's designed to be dead drifted. So it's on a jig hook. We started selling this hook at the shop finally. I finally convinced Curtis to bring some in, but this is the S506. It's a super sharp hook. It's a nice heavy hook too. But basically I wanted a streamer that it was a bait fish style pattern that I could hang under an indicator and fish some of the bigger rivers with. When I go up to like Idaho, places like that, I want to be able to fish under a really big indicator and just dead drift them. So this works really well for that. So I'm going to tie it in my favorite color, which is the baitfish gray color. So we're going to go ahead and start the thread right at this bend on this jig hook. And we're going to add in some lead eyes. Surprise, surprise, more double pupil eyes. This time I'm going to go with the all orange one with the black pupil. And then I'm going to build a little thread bump right here at the bend of this jig hook so I can set my eyes against it. So I'm just going to work my way back and get some glue. We'll glue those eyes like normal. And then I'm going to make a little belly flash on this, so I'll take some ice dub. This is the UV tan color. I also like the minnow belly color a lot. And normally I would do this bottom part in a dubbing loop just to get a little bit buggier, but I don't have my dubbing twister here, so I'm just going to tie it on chunky. And then we're going to use a little bit of, so I'll use 1 or 2 colors on this combination. This one happens to be grizzly, but it's a lighter grizzly that I picked out when I saw it. The chinchilla color works really, really well if you just want like that more silvery color. But a lot of times these grizzly ones come in really light and it's a really good color. So about half of them come in kind of a lighter color or a darker color. So. And then I'm going to take some scissors and I'm going to taper the rabbit strip. It's nice to have razor scissors to do this part so that way you don't cut out too much of the hair. You can kind of just get it in there and cut out just the leather. Alright, so you kind of can see what I've done there as far as the taper. And then I tend to use my vise for measurements on lengths on tails and things like that. So where my material clip is about where I want the leather to end. So I'll cut that off there. And measure that up. I need to puncture the leather. Okay, so we're just tying in that rabbit strip right there with some nice high tension thread wraps there to kind of lock that in. And then I'll take that belly flash there and kind of pick it out so that way it blends into the tail a little bit. So now I'll make a dubbing loop now that I have my stuffs. And I'm going to make a little gill flare on this guy. So I have some red ice dub, ice wing fiber, whatever you have. It's all the same stuff. And I'm going to cut it so it is maybe an inch. So this is about that long now, so pretty short. And we're going to spin that up. On baitfish patterns, I'm a big fan of having some sort of like gill flare on them or some red element. Stole that from the bass game, you know. They have a lot of red accent and like red hooks, you know, things like that. So some of those bass guys know what they're doing, I guess. So we're going to tie that in and have a little red gill flare right there. Okay, so we got that in there. Now I'm going to take a little piece of heron gray marabou. Again, I'll try to find a little bit smaller piece. Oh, this hook was a size 1, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that, but size 2 works really well too. Alright, so we'll get a couple wraps of gray marabou in there. Alright, so we got one behind the stem there. And we'll brush it out so it's not clumped up anymore. And then I'll take a little hair clip just to get that marabou out of the way because I'm going to do one more dubbing loop for the head here. I actually want that to be a little bit longer than that. When you do that, because I'm going to do a bruiser blend head that's in a dubbing loop, and it kind of, a lot of it brushes out. I haven't figured out a way to avoid that yet, so kind of have to make a little bit longer one. But I like the length that Bruiser Blend Jr. in a dubbing loop does for a head on these smaller baitfish patterns. This is the Alpha Wolf color. And I'm just stacking like a little pile in front of me so I can get it lined up to put in the dubbing loop. And we'll go ahead and spin that up. And it's gonna bind up like crazy with the bruiser blend, with the yarn style. You just brush it out. So just get it spun up really tight so you can kind of get aggressive with the brushing at it. And you can kind of work up and down on it, it'll loosen it up. So. Okay, that's pretty good right there. So I'm gonna try to preen this all so it's flowing back, so it's kind of like a hackle. I'll do a couple wraps behind the eyes. And then I'm gonna go across and over towards you guys. So like this, and around this back eye. Then I'll go in front of the eye closest to me, and then around that one, and up front. It's kind of like a figure eight there. And then
next in the Adventure Theater, we have
a couple wraps in front of that. And this is another one that you're gonna have to brush it out, so if it gets all matted down like it is now, no biggie. Okay, so we got that captured.
next in the Adventure Theater, we have Adam Overnick with Noco Fly Fishing talking about Tenkara rods.
This is perfect for Tenkara. Okay, so I'm just gonna build a little thread head here. And then, because I'm gonna brush this, I'm gonna actually whip finish it after I brush it, because sometimes I end up breaking the thread or something, so. I'll use a combination of the comb side of this tool and the Velcro side to kind of get that all brushed out there. Oh, this is the Stonfo brush comb combo, I think is what it's called. It's pretty awesome. All right, so I'll go ahead and whip finish now.
In 15 minutes, we'll have last call for the red ticket raffle by the front door.
All righty. So, again, this one's made so it fishes on the dead drift mainly. You can strip this one. I've actually caught fish on this one stripping it before. It does pretty well that way. But this little bruiser blend head being on a dubbing loop makes it nice and thin there. It's got that kind of nice bloody profile to it with the gill pack in there. It's kind of a messy fly, but once it gets wet, it makes a really nice baitfish silhouette. So it's one of my go-to ones for sure. But I got to get out of here now. So thanks for everybody for showing up. Appreciate it. Yeah.